All right, hello everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining our final, the third out of 3 CLTC Arts events. My name is Nick Merrill. I direct the Daylight Lab at the UC Berkeley Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity. And about a year ago, we at CLTC embarked on something that was totally new for us, funding artists. We were fed up, and still in a way are fed up, with hackneyed portrayals of hackers in hoodies, green padlocks, ones and zeros flying by. This is a set of imagery that hasn't really been updated since the original Matrix film in 1999. And that is at the absolute latest. So we decided that cybersecurity needed a new and more inclusive, more global visuality. So it's part of our ongoing effort to try to expand and redefine cybersecurity's representations, kind of what cybersecurity is, whom it affects, and of course, who gets to do it. So we ended up funding a number of artists and projects that we thought would help address this issue. One of those artists, so some of those artists, are Greg Niemeyer, Olivia Holston, Oliver Moldlow, Jacqueline Serrano, and I am going to hand it over to Sydney Skybetter. Sydney Skybetter is a public humanities fellow, lecturer, and director of undergraduate studies in the Theater, Arts, and Performance Studies Department at Brown University, where he researches the problematics of human-computer interfaces and mixed reality systems. He is the founder of the Conference for Research on Choreographic Interfaces.
Hello, thank you, Nick, and greetings, nerds. My name indeed is Sydney Skybetter, and it's a real pleasure to be here virtually with you all, especially as someone, I got into questions of data science and computation as a result of watching the 1995 Angelina Jolie film, Hackers, which still haunts me indeed to this day. Nonetheless, it is my task now to introduce you to the work of the hour, a piece by Greg Niemeyer called SweetWire. And I'm going to somewhat unceremoniously read the description of this work because I think it actually is quite evocative, and the language is, I think, very intentional. And I'd love to talk more about it with the artist in a moment. Now, SweetWire is a music video project that translates a successful containment of a cybersecurity attack into music and choreographed motion. The music video is a dialogue between hacker and target. This approach casts cybersecurity as an ongoing dialogue arising from the need to balance security and connectivity, and as a continuous effort to distinguish legitimate and illicit transactions. The name of the video refers to typical alter egos of hackers and cybersecurity teams who find themselves in this constant dialogue. Now, for myself, this project speaks vitally, I think, to our contemporary moment in computer science, a moment when human-computer interfaces have grown increasingly choreographic and issues of data security and privacy more corporeal. Without further ado, please enjoy SweetWire. Lovely. And we're back. I realize it's sort of, there's no real corollary to applause at the end of a screening here, given that I can't see literally anybody else at the moment, but I'm just going to go ahead and applaud for the work and hope you'll join me. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to Greg, who's a professor of new media in our practice at UC Berkeley and is the co-founder for the Center for New Media. Greg, can we pull you up? Are you there?
Checking in. How you all doing? Good to see you. Thank you for sharing that video. This is very much the first time that we've shared it in public, and it is looked a little unusual to me because of the various layers of translation, but I hope you enjoyed it anyways. And of course, there is a link that you can watch it at your pleasure at home, and I'm just going to share that right now with everybody. So you want to look at all of the details of it, which are very important. You can go for it right there. Okay, good. Yes, Sydney.
Lisa, Shanti, and many people in the chat are giving wild applause. So we have an earnest simulacrum of applause happening, which is maybe apropos of the subject. So Greg, I have literally so many questions for you, but maybe by way of starting, can you tell us a little bit like, and I know realize this is sort of the bane of any artist's Q&A talk, but like why SweetWire? Where did this project come from? And how did it emerge from your artistic practice?
Thanks, that's a great question. And before I answer it directly, I just want to thank Lisa Niemeyer, my wife, for helping me through this whole project, and also Medina Lam, my daughter, who helped do a lot of the production on the day we recorded most of the shots. The work really comes from a previous project called the Network Paradox, which I worked on with DJ Spooky and Roger Antonsen, and it was all about trying to come to terms with the feeling of being overwhelmed by data. And we looked at a lot of ways in which networks transform, and one of the topics, of course, was what if a network gets infiltrated, and how do the nodes pass on, say, a virus from one node to another. Of course, this was in 2018. Now in 2020, the way viruses gets passed on through networks is, of course, something that we deal with every day. And so that topic has only become more prevalent, this topic of infection and takeover and viral transformations. So that's where that started.
Right. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the visual vocabulary of this work. Now, in developing this project, you said, and I quote, cybersecurity looks more like particle systems than like command prompts, more like like a network than a man in a hoodie with glowing green letters. So you're clearly hearkening back to a kind of a history of visual representation of computation, and doing some really fascinating things with it. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about sort of the relevance of this project to the visualization of cybersecurity.
Yeah, so that's a very important point. We felt that a new visual language was required, a new aesthetic, because we know that data works and we know that information technology works. We rely on it every day. But earlier you mentioned something about the graphics of the interfaces, and I think the graphics are often designed to obscure the complexity of what happens underneath. And when we look at the complexity of what happens underneath the surface, we are suddenly faced with an overwhelming amount of information that flows from nodes to nodes across the world. And in order to visualize that, I wanted to talk about abstraction. I wanted to talk about how data is really the pulling away of information from what it's about. So for example, when we take our temperature, we take the information from our forehead and pull it away and return it into a number and put it into a record. Well, if we do that over and over again, we eventually get a picture of the world and say what everybody's temperature is. And we do that with many, many things. And that's the fundamental process of abstraction. But once something is abstract, it exists in this funny state where it's neither quite alive nor is it quite dead, because it still can become active at any point, but it's also not really alive. It's just data. And it matters a great deal who is controlling that data and if it's safe or not. And there's many questions about its status. And so the materiality of that strange status, what I thought was best expressed with the point cloud, which is a strange way of recording a scene by looking at where in the world various points that are cast out from a camera where those points land. It's almost like spraying a room with a spray and looking how far each spray dot flies, and then making a record of the spray dots. And so that point cloud capture system is something that's used a lot in Lidar scanning. It's used a lot in Kinect, Microsoft Kinect devices. And we were able to hack one of those devices to get the data we wanted out of it. And that was a lot of fun.
Indeed. Well, it seems like both very serious and a lot of fun. I do want to remind our audience here, feel free to post and upvote questions to the Q&A. We will be collating and curating those over the coming hour, and so feel free to throw down abundantly. Greg, I want to return to this notion of the sort of visualization of complexity. Because in watching this piece, I'm struck by the sort of the visual polyphonics of it, like the moments where you are viewing either the same or differing objects from multiple data vantage points. And so I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how you kind of curated for the visual. And this is me anticipating a conversation about video production and music, but I'm curious your thoughts in terms of how you thought of the kind of simultaneous layering of data in this context.
Yeah, for that, maybe can I share my screen and show a few slides of what we did?
Please.
So let me go into this a little bit. I prepared a few pictures for you, but this is where we started with visualizations of what does the network look like. And then we had these kinds of visualizations. These were from Network Paradox, which I mentioned before. Again, work we did with Roger Antonsen and DJ Spooky and many others, actually. And then I have to say that Hallie really was the first person to start dealing with the topic, in the sense that I gave Hallie, our composer, a sort of an outline of what I thought the temporal dimensions would be of this experience, where you think one thing, the movie starts very much with the dancer standing in the foreground and sort of, well, the dancer pops out of a sphere of particles and then becomes the hacker that sort of uses a gesture to indicate that they're entering a door with the door code maybe that was obtained somehow illegitimately, but then they're in the door, they're in the world that they're seeking to get access to. And so from there on, there's kind of a struggle, and the struggle goes to a certain point of intensity, where suddenly there's this synthesis between the hacker and the hacked, between the hacker and the system, where the system becomes like the hacker, and there's a kind of a peaceful moment at the end. So there was this flow of drama that I had in mind, and I shared that with Hallie Smith, and she then went on to compose a sonic structure around that, and it's that sonic structure that gave us then the outline for the dance. And so when the dance recording happened on, was it January 19th, 2020? Seems like a different century. We simply spent the day recording Olivia Holston dancing various phrases that she developed based on the music, and then we layered those later on back together with the music. And I can show you a clip of what that was like when we did the recording. It's a kind of a mysterious clip, but I think it really tells the story very well. Okay, it's a lovely take that Jackie Serrano, one of our videographers, did with a real camera, showing how we recorded a single gesture that Olivia did with the hand over and over again with our Kinect camera. And you hear the voices of Joshua and Oliver and myself planning it out. So let's roll.
You're picking up the lights on the ceiling. There. Pull down. Get closer. Angle down. So the hand does appear to have some kind of shadow element on it. It's like it's too close, so you should come back. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Well, hit V and R.
Okay. Rolling.
So do the acceleration.
So Greg, to be clear, this is unedited video footage of a hand.
Yeah, exactly. And it just describes exactly how we recorded this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Start super relaxed, silent, slow at first, and then just do one version.
I have to say, watching a video of a real hand, like triply mediated through your computer and my Zoom, is bananas. So I have, oh, please go ahead.
So I just wanted to show this clip because it shows how we're struggling. I honestly have to tell you, Nick, and as CLTC, I had no idea this would actually work. I just thought this might work. And when we got funding, I was like, okay, I think we can figure out how this works. And then after a few tests, we really had to figure out the technology and the aesthetic we wanted. And that's exactly what you want. You want to have people working on what it takes to make a new aesthetic work. So this back and forth on the hand and how we should record it and what the right angle is, that exactly represents the struggle we had in finding that aesthetic. And so that's why I wanted to share it.
That's great. No, I love the phrasing there, because indeed to create a new aesthetic takes work, takes labor, and in this case takes collaboration. And so this is maybe me teeing up Hallie Smith. So if we can please, Hallie, if you wouldn't mind joining us in the Zoom room.
Hello, I'm here. Can you hear
amazing.
me?
Hi, yes, loud and clear. So Hallie, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the creative process from your standpoint, how it was that you worked with Greg, and if you can tell us maybe a little bit about the kind of the machinations of the end of your creative product.
I heard most of your question, but
feel free to answer any question you like.
Got a little garbled. Sure. So I first, Greg asked me to do the video, really excited, and where most of the inspiration came from was the initial meeting where we talked about some video and audio reference points for how we wanted this to look and sound. And from there, we had just gotten that Greg showed in the slideshow of the modular synthesizer, which I had never worked with before using it for that purpose. So it was a great learning experience. And I was also kind of fascinated by making something that sounds at once like an arm and at once sucks you in auditorily. So that's where those like pulsing sounds, these sustained drones come from in the music. And they have, I'm also really fascinated by like really fine tuning styles and locking pitches into what we consider in Western music, like in tune, in terms of their intervals. So there's a lot of points of tension, tension relative to release, that I also wanted to play with. And then the fact that it's a synthesizer also comes up, something that we talked about in the initial conversation, which was there's points at which two visual spectra become one. And so I wanted to kind of mimic that in the music in a way too.
May I add one thing to that?
Of course, Greg.
One of the core concepts reminds me of an Ohlone tradition. Ohlone are the Native Americans whose land we are on here in Berkeley, California. And when they went to hunt, they often took the gland of a deer they hunted before and rubbed their bodies with deer scent and tried to mimic the appearance of a deer and essentially join the herd of deer until the deer felt that they were one of them. So it was a process of assimilation between hunter and hunted. And then eventually when the deer felt comfortable with the hunter among them, the hunter would grab a rope and choke a deer and kill it and bring it back to the home to eat. And then the cycle would repeat. And it was a very embodied version of hunting. And it was that idea of like the merging between the hacker and the system. And that really was key for the music as well, because we had phrases that build up and they sort of are a little bit out of shift and then they eventually come together and they resonate with each other. And I think it was a really beautiful sound that made that coming together of things and the intensifying of things clear. And Hallie explained that just beautifully, but I just want to emphasize that it was very much the texture of the sound was very much part of the program of the project.
Sure. And I so appreciate the kind of embodied narrative that you're referring to here. Somewhat speaking of bodies and embodiment, and also anticipating a great question from Richard Wong in the Q&A, it's my pleasure to now introduce Olivia to the conversation. Olivia, are you there? Great.
Hi, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes.
Great. Hello.
So Olivia, can you talk a little bit about the choreographic practice and work in this piece? Can you talk a little bit about how you and Greg worked together, and indeed how sort of bodies are figured in this project?
Yeah, well, actually, so I was really grateful, and I appreciated when he asked me to join the team, because I've never worked with a group like this before with so many different skills. So how we worked was that, that we actually had this first meeting with Jackie as well, the video producer, and Hallie and Greg and me, so all of the four of us. And after that, Hallie had sent us a draft of the music. And for me as a dancer, I think I prefer to start working with music and then building off, like getting inspired by the music itself. And so for me, I was trying to listen to very carefully all the different layers that Hallie was using and that she included in the music. And I just went off of that. And I actually, to create the movement, I went into the studio, or I was in my room, like right now, and just began to improvise. And I recorded myself so that I would remember the movement that I really enjoyed doing with the music.
Great. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit, and this may be a question across you and Greg, if you can talk a little bit about like the sort of the ways of working in the moment. Because I mean, you know, for myself as a choreographer, I'm struck somewhat, Olivia, to your point, that there aren't like a whole lot of like best practices exactly for like data-oriented choreography, right? Like there's not like, you can't like read the book or take the class necessarily, except maybe at Berkeley where you probably can. In any event, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you work together, and maybe more specifically, like how Greg, with your through your directorial vision, you were able to collaborate with Olivia's choreographic vision.
Well, I guess if we're talking about the day of the shoot, so when I arrived in this, what was it? It was like some kind of studios slash church, I guess. I'm not quite sure what the building was.
Data church, yes.
Yes. Well, when I arrived there, I had this plan of showing all these different phrases, and then actually Greg told me and suggested to just use short phrases so that they could then videotape that and record that, and then so that the movement could then be translated into the computer with the program. And I think I think the directing of Greg's was more like he would tell me to slow down the movement quite a bit, which I think for me was my biggest challenge in this project, because I don't know, I think especially for the movements that originally were created to be fast or faster than what I had done in the video. Because some movements really I had to, like, I don't know, ballet terms, plie, which means to bend your knees, and I had to like hold that position while doing these like slow movements to then capture for the video to capture the movement. And I could demonstrate as well.
Yeah, please, by all means.
I was thinking, do you mind if we quickly share this screen? and then I'll go back. So remember, this movement was with the back contortion, and the things you mentioned were very important, because the dialogue between body and data, and what we do to our bodies in order to fit the data, or to fit into what the sort of data models that are expected of us, is impressive. And the dialogue between what you did and how to capture it is really a metaphor for the dialogue between our lives lived and how they're reflected in the data that is collected about us, and that we often rely to live our lives in better ways according to a wide range of different values. Anyways, so yeah, remember this movement here, this back movement is very striking. It's in a way scary, but let's do it fast like you normally do it, and let's try and do it slower. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing again. So we'll put the spotlight on you too there, one sec.
Let me just move my chair.
This is happening.
So the original way was, I guess I'll face the back as it's shown in the video.
Sure.
Originally, it was like this.
Yep, got it. That works.
Yay. It was haunting. It was like Modern Dance meets Blair Witch meets Zoom.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I guess I'd love to maybe depart somewhat from the process of choreographing and performing through the body as rendered by data, and maybe open up the conversation to Jackie, Oliver, and Joshua. These are looking more towards the questions of video production and cinematography. Can I add all of you nerds on here as well, please? Great. Greetings, nerds. So I think I can see you all. You can all hear us. Thumbs up. Excellent. So I wonder if we can talk a little bit about, from the production standpoint, what it was like to work on this project. And I wonder maybe if, Jackie, I can call on you first to offer your vantage point.
Sure. So I'll talk a little bit about the actual filming process. It was a little bit challenging at first because when we were filming, we couldn't actually see the video that we were recording. It was kind of just, we had to get a feel of where everything was and then move very slowly. And Greg, Oliver, and I kind of did this really interesting thing where we were holding the camera, the laptop behind us, and these cables these wires to connect the camera to the laptop. And we had like the camera on a tripod with wheels. And so we would kind of just inch forward together. So if you can imagine, we were about like 3-4 inches apart from each other, just back to back, just kind of moving together with this machine. And that's how we were kind of recording some of the scenes, like the spaces like that you would see in there. And it was a lot of fun. It was really interesting. Yeah, I'll pass it over to Oliver.
Yeah, I think kind of the most interesting thing for me was actually trying to understand the sort of spatial implications of using a Lidar scanner, and specifically this scanner itself. A lot of Lidar scanners are built for like architectural purposes to scan like large rooms, but this one we hacked a Connect scanner, so we had a very specific range in which we could capture images. And in doing so, we had to be very careful and meticulous about the spaces that we were capturing and the distance at which we were from those spaces and walls, so that you could kind of start to understand the locations that Olivia was in the video. And I thought that was a really interesting sort of play that we had to go through while going to these kind of obscure locations.
I mean, it sounds like a meta choreographics of its own, as mediated or parametered by the technology and your hackery of it. Josh, I wonder your thoughts on all this crazy making.
Well, as an experienced cinematographer, I can say I have never worked with a camera system like the one we did in this project. It was amazing, really unique. The only analog for it is back when I was shooting on 16mm film, when you were shooting with no monitor. You know, you're really just having to basically frame every image using, you know, as best as you can, an intuitive knowledge of how the camera operates. And in this case on set, it really was just kind of just trying to describe the cone that was produced. You know, what is the actual area that we can shoot? How far did these lasers go? What type of bounce back are we getting? And the only way to do that was by getting back these single frame images that would, you know, it was like a development process, very similar to analog film, where you had to kind of wait to develop the image to see exactly what kind of still frame you were getting from a certain shot, a certain angle, a certain position, and adjust from there. And after a few test shots, I felt confident that we could pull it off. And man, I'm really satisfied with the results. It looks fantastic. And really hoping that we can all see a high-res version off of the Zoom platform so we can get a look at all those little points of light, all those little dots that are making up the image. I think it really looks great.
No, I'm biased, but I concur. It does look great. I'm so fascinated by your languaging around like intuition and kind of knowledgeable guesswork. And then you said something like you don't know how the laser is going to scatter, or like what the data is going to look like. And it sounds like there's a lot of like sort of uninformed decision making in the best sort of possible way. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the relationship between like your apparatus of capture and the visual results of the work. Because I mean, it sounds like there was a lot of, on one hand, sort of educated guesswork, but it also sounds like there must have been some intuition and processing. So can you talk a little bit about how you went from capture to the finished product from a visual perspective?
I think Jackie, I think I'm going to pass it to you because I think you're more involved with the whole process. I was just mostly a cinematographer, but you really were trying to take the images and prepare them for post-production.
Yeah, so I remember we were doing a couple of test shots where we would see how far the camera would capture the point cloud dots. So a couple of times Greg had me stand in front of the camera and then take a couple steps back until I would like disappear. Because if you think about, you know, those little toys that you would play when you were younger where you'd put your hand into it and like there were needles, that's exactly what it would look like. So the more you would pull back, the less you would show. So then we kind of set these boundaries for that. And on top of that, as Olivia had said previously, we had to move very slowly and we could only capture a certain amount of like the movement within that time frame. So a couple of times like we had to go over and over again. Yeah, so we really just had to work within a certain bound within the studio itself and with whatever scene that we had, whether outside or inside, and just I guess kind of use our intuition to see what would look the best. And on top of that, we had to kind of move the camera fluidly so that each frame would come out the right way, you know, like it would look like an actual camera. Because as you know, like they shoot however many frames per second, and this is capturing things like extremely slowly. So that as well.
Let me expand on that. Yeah, so their frame rate for normal camera is like 30 frames per second or 60 or 24, but this one, because of the amount of data we capture, we can really only store 5 megabytes 10 times a second. So the frame rate was around 8 to 10 seconds, but it wasn't very consistent because it always about how fast can the computer store the data. And that I will say though that we didn't really capture an image directly. We captured the location of things in space. So we had these like 160,000 points that would all be distributed somewhere across the space. And so a picture from this camera was really a list of places where those dots that we sent out landed. And I knew that when we had that data, we could then bring it into other software that we wrote in processing in order to frame it again. So we could actually change the point of view. And you see that in the video several times. You see how the bear, for example, you almost rotate around the bear. And it's a wonderful effect, but we're really just looking at a single set of points from different points of view. So it was actually a second filming that happened after the capture that was totally synthetic and in the studio. It was that time between January and March when I didn't talk to anybody. And I was just sitting there trying to move these things around and turn them into some kind of cohesive whole. but that of course gave me the freedom also to stitch images together that never really happened. Like Olivia never stood right next to that bear, and although I'm sure he would have danced, even the bear would have danced if he would have stood next to it. It was a stuffed bear, but nevertheless, even it would have gotten into some motion with you standing next to it. But all that was synthetic. All that was composed synthetically. And again, that talks about cybersecurity in the sense that a lot of the meaning of data only comes from processing it when it becomes information. And a lot of the questions about how we extract value from data happen not at the level of collection of data, but at the level of data analysis. And you could think of cybersecurity as something that happens where we protect the data, but we really need to protect the information. And we also need to protect the information not only from people who don't have legitimate access to it, but even people who have legitimate access sometimes do illegitimate things with the data. And so there's a question about cybersecurity that's much broader, and we always have to ask ourselves, are we using data in a fair and just way? And that's a fundamental question that this video is trying to get at. The question of cybersecurity is much broader and multifaceted than typically framed. There is no solid boundary between good guys and bad guys. There's no binary. It's much more complicated.
No, I so appreciate how the complexity of that rhetoric was baked into the visual and sonic layer of this film. I'd love to now segue a little bit to audience Q&A, and as many of you have already done, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A and upvote them if you are so inclined. I'd love to maybe start with Richard's question from a little bit ago. Richard Wong in the chat says he'd love to hear more of your thoughts and process about the representation of the human body. We've talked a little bit about some of the sort of historical connections between bodies and computing, and certainly sort of stereotypes of hackers and cybersecurity. Can you talk a little bit about the representation of the human body in this, specifically pertaining to digital avatars, computational devices attached to bodies, et cetera? So maybe this can be a question for Greg, but we can expand from there.
Yeah, that's a deep question. That's a whole class at Berkeley as well. How do we represent the human body? And there's a subtext there. How do people represent each other? How do they misrepresent each other? And long conversations there. And when I was first starting to film or capture Olivia's movements, it was really about the movements. And the body is really coming to life when it moves, of course. And so the emphasis was on capturing Olivia's movements as an expression. So it's not just representing a body, it's representing an expression and a statement. And really, Olivia's statements, I think, came through very clearly and were in some ways amplified dramatically by also the data falling apart where the representation fails. One thing that I think is important is that most representations claim totality. They say, this is what it really looks like Napoleon on the horse. This is what it really looks like. Of course, none of that's true, but the image always is presented as something integral, complete, with a frame and saying, this is all you need to know right here. Never mind the rest. And that is leading to a lot of misrepresentation and essentially lies. And our representation may have problems like that too in some way, but fundamentally we're showing the fragility of the representational method. Like half the time it's hard to make out signal from noise. Half the time the body feels kind of shaky, and we really like that because it brings into question the sort of the integrity of representation. And we're saying that we're leaving out as much as we show, and that's an important statement to make right there.
I love your phrasing, data falls apart. And I so appreciate that it seems like the sort of the procedural rhetoric of this video is to suggest or argue that data is always partial, especially when it pertains to the body. I wonder if any of the other collaborators have anything to say on the subject of the body and its representation. Go ahead.
Do you mind if I follow up a little bit? Olivia, how
please,
does it feel to your dancing, and you are that body? How does it feel when you see the video and your body sort of rendered into a pixel shell or a data shell? Does it feel, how does it feel?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was the first time I saw my pixelated body, I was really surprised and but also very excited because I've never seen anything like this before. And yeah, I honestly don't really know what to say, because again, it's something that I haven't seen before, and I've never worked with this kind of technology as well with dance. I've always, I don't know, like recorded myself, but just like for an audition or something, and just recorded, I guess, normally without all this technology. And it was really interesting to see all the little pixels that created the body figure.
Yeah. So it's, I guess you would call them, I see why you call it pixels, because it feels like that, and we're familiar with that. And we know pixels as parts of an image, but really they're vectors. They're just three-dimensional vectors. They have an X and a Y and a Z, versus a pixel only has an X and a Y. So that's, I just wanted to say that for like integrity and accuracy. They're vectors. Okay, onwards.
Thank you. I mean, I have to imagine that seeing oneself as a pixel portrait, or as a vector portrait more properly, would be somewhat alienating. And yet here we are on Zoom. I want to go to Alyssa's, apologies if I'm mispronouncing that, Alyssa's question here, and this is maybe tacitly for Hallie. So it seems this project is forward thinking, and there was some question about the use of the modular synthesizer. I was wondering about some of the limitations of that particular choice, that technical choice. Let's see, where did the idea for the use of the modular synthesizer come from? Was there a specific reason? How was it utilized? And bravo to all the artists. So Hallie, maybe we can draw you back on here. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about some of the choice of technology and platform here.
So the choice for the modular synthesizer was mine, and it has several reasons, one of which really taking from one of the reference videos that Greg originally sent me, taking a sequence of 4 pitches and eventually synthesizing them into something quite different from their original. And I thought there's several options in order to get that kind of sound. But at this point, we had gotten a grant at SynMat for this modular synthesizer, and I was really excited to be using it. And also, I think we've been talking about the reference points from how bodies are represented using digital technology, and a lot of this these visuals come from like 80s and 90s, a little earlier, but all of this is developing at the same time. So it was also for that reason that I chose to use the modular synthesizer. And there are also several other, it's not only the modular synthesizer in the music, there are several other things involved. And at this point, if it's all right, I think I could share my screen and show the session, because that could give a better idea. Perfect. So this is hopefully in this this session.
We can see it really clear.
Okay, perfect. So on this, on the side here, on these left, these are groups of tracks. So there's violin, there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 different violin tracks, which I can solo and play for you, so you can hear kind of behind the scenes of what are all these like.
Now we can hear.
So this should be coming through. So these are just the violin tracks, and then there's also this this drum machine called the Octatrack, which I have had my hands on now for about a year, and I'm recording this in October of 2019. So I was really new to the Octatrack setup, but it basically sequences a bunch of different sounds from steps 1 to 16, and you cycle through the different sounds. So I can play a little bit of what that sounds like as well. So you can hear it has this looping quality, and there are some kind of kick drums that come in and out there. And all of this was an attempt to really layer and create a kind of auditory tension from what's coming from where. And the modular synthesizer, in fact, is different sounds are coming from the right and left speakers. So if you listen to it with headphones, it should be quite clear and pronounced, like this, the right ear is doing something here and the left is, so I hope that answers the question.
That was great. No, and I have to say that the in hearing the component parts of the piece, it clarified for me. It feels like sort of Johan Johansson meets the film The Predator. So lovely work. I think we have time for maybe one more question from the Q&A, and I'm going to give this to Elizabeth, who asked about ways of all of your working together, wondering about establishing means of communication, especially considering all of the different layers and processing that are part of this piece. Can you talk to any sort of moments of productive exchange where you figured out like how to collaborate and work together despite all the uncertainties of the project, but also maybe moments of confusion and uncertainty?
Yeah,
Please.
that's a big question. I first want to credit two people for teaching me how to collaborate in the first place. Chris Chafe from Karma at Stanford and Lisa Wymore, who's a dance professor here and actually does teach that class on data-based choreographies. And
she's great.
So they're wonderful people, and I've been collaborating for many years. And really, to me, the secret is to remember that different people have different values, and all of those values are equally important in the end result. So there's a visual value, there's a choreographic kinetic value, and there's a musical value, and they all need to be respected equally. So I don't know, I spent a lot of time thinking about how to respect all those different things together, and I hope that is felt in the end result as well.
I mean, it's certainly visually and sonically palpable from the finished work. I wonder if there's any other comments on this question before shifting it back to Nick for final remarks. Fantastic.
I have to say one more thing, which
please,
is,
of course.
Jackie mentioned how we were working together, literally 4 inches apart, moving across the screen or across the space with this big camera rig that we hacked together. And we couldn't do that now. There's no way we could do that now to be COVID safe, right? So I'm glad we did it then. But we actually sang a song to keep us all in step. And it was like kind of like a work song or something, where we had to be like, okay, in one step, and it went something like da 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 da, and we would sing it together so we would be able to move in sync more. And I guess at the end of the day, when you collaborate, singing is really a wonderful way to instill that sense of synchronicity and also steadiness and respect. And so that's what I'd like to end on there.
And well, amen to that. Old school was the best school. Greg, team, thank you all very much for sharing your work with us today. A round of thunderous applause, please, from the galley. Mazel tov, and much obliged. Thank you all for your time. It's now my pleasure to toss the Zoom to Nick for final remarks. Thank you.
Wow, what a great session. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for the whole team for sharing, details about your process. And Sydney, fantastic interlocutor skills. I'm so impressed by your ability to balance all of the moving parts in this session. And thank you all for joining us for the session, for asking questions. It really makes the session come alive. And thank you for joining us, for those of you who've joined us a few times now, for this entire series. It's been great to have you here. We've loved it. Please stay in touch. I think we'll have a slide up soon. Here you go. There are some ways to stay in touch with Greg and all of the co-creators, also Sydney. And finally, ways to stay in touch with us at CLTC. Please check us out on social media, all of us. And we hope to be in touch soon with, I hope, more events for you to join us for. So thank you again. This was a wonderful session. Thanks so much.